Hey everybody, Eric Spitzer here from TheGamer, and I'm here with Spider Stacy, reviewer of Spider-Man 2. How are you? Stacy Henley.
Hello.
While we're just sort of swinging around the city here, I suppose we should do a quick spoiler warning. This is a
Yes.
very spoilerable game, I would say.
Yeah, I think because a lot of people care about the suits that are in the game, the boss battles that you have, where the story goes. It's not like in most games where it's the ending is the spoiler.
Hmm.
So if we're going to be showing some of the new suits today, we're going to go through a couple of the boss battles. We're going to have one of the really big boss battles right at the end of the video. So uh,
Yeah,
be
and
warned.
some characters throughout that you
Yeah.
should expect, but if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, check it out later after you play the game.
Yep.
So Um, Spider-Man with the power of the PS5. That's what we're looking at here, right?
Yeah, I mean it's from Insomniac, and there are bits of Insomniac's touches in there. Obviously, the big thing that they sold Ratchet and Clank on was that you could go through the Rift portals. There's kind of similar stuff in Spider-Man where things are just so much quicker. There's nothing particularly there's not doesn't feel like there's a massive technical upgrade from the first game. Everything just runs smoother and looks better and works better.
Hmm.
But there's very deliberately um, they're not showing off the way that Naughty Dog did, trying to flex every technical muscle. It just makes the game faster and smoother.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that portal thing you mentioned a little later. It was
Yeah.
we were only allowed to use 20 minutes of footage. It was hard for me not to just do 20 minutes of swinging through portals because that is
Yes,
pretty. I mean, it upstages Ratchet and Clank by a degree.
definitely.
Um, so the two refined combat things in the sequel here is the stealth and the combat itself, and this sequence is going to kind of get into both of those things. And watching it while I was putting this video together, what I was struck by was something I sort of expected, in that in refining Spider-Man, Insomniac has managed to just make the best superhero game, Batman Arkham City. I mean, aren't we just like aren't we just getting to exactly what Arkham City did
I
with
mean,
its
I
stealth and with its combos and items and stuff like that?
I love Arkham City. I still think that's the thing that games should be aiming for. I remember, as it's not a superhero game, but I remember playing Final Fantasy VII Remake when they obviously went from the turn-based of the original to the action combat that the remake had, and thinking this feels like Arkham City. That's still, to me, the best compliment you can pay to this kind of
Yeah.
fast combat with the various different combos and doing under things. So there's definitely a sense of that in Spider-Man, but what I think upgrades it from both the original game and Miles is the way the abilities work and the way the gadgets work. It used to be in the first Spider-Man that every suit had its own special power.
Hmm.
Spider-Punk had the guitar, you could do like a slam with it and do an clear out all the enemies around him. This game has no special powers per suit, but in the bottom left corner there, you can see the spider arm powers that I've got with Peter. As you go through the game, you can not just upgrade them and make them better, um, but you can also actually change what they are. So you're choosing ahead of time what powers you think you'll need, what powers you want to use. And the gadgets are really well integrated as well. We saw about a minute ago, I used the web slinging mine, which pulls enemies closer together, but as they get upgraded, they start to pull objects in as well, so you can cause a lot of damage that way. And that item that I have there on the far right, I only have one of them in this scene, because this is fairly early on. You can have up to 3 of those, and they're concussive bombs, like grenades basically. And they also, you can pull people towards those and have after effects from that. So I think things chain together a lot more than other Spider-Man games have. But you're right, that is just what Batman did 10
It's
years
just
ago.
it's just what Batman did. And honestly, like if all things were exactly the same, but the only difference between this one and the past Spider-Man was getting rid of that radial menu, like, I'm
Yeah,
sold. That's all I needed.
the
Just do it
radial
the way
menu is
Batman
gone.
did
There are
it.
some other upgrades as well, but yeah, that has gone. It's no more.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're on to Miles,
Yeah,
the superior Spider-Man.
I preferred playing as Miles in this game, definitely.
And you mentioned in your review that he has a much better story, more interesting relationships than Peter does.
Yeah, so obviously, people who've stuck around past that spoiler one will know that the symbiote is a big factor in the story. So most of the
Mhm.
main story, the core narrative, is about um Peter and his relationship with Harry and how it affects the characters around them. But with Miles, there's a lot of the smaller stories. You see him deal with the kind of personal relationships more. He's out of the suit more. You see him as Miles more than you see Peter as Peter. So I just found Miles to be a lot more compelling in how he drives the story forward. Because the Spider-Man symbiote story, it's interesting. There's some new takes on it, but I know a lot of symbiote stories.
Yeah.
I kind of
I
knew
just heard
what a
two
lot of the
words:
beats were going to be in the main
missing
path,
in
whereas the
person.
Miles
So I'm gonna
stuff,
say yes.
I felt like was constantly
Go
surprising
ahead.
me.
Yeah,
No,
and his
save your
just
seat.
him being part of the symbiote story, it is the twist, right? Like that's what makes it a unique retelling
Gotta
of
catch up
that
to the
old
principal. Handcuffs me
symbiote
won't move.
saga. Like
Yeah, you get
seeing
a
it from
lot
his
more like bouncing
perspective,
off. Absolutely, it's not usually the symbiote story is Spider-Man kind of descending into the
the dark side.
the dark side. They like being compelled by the symbiote that controls him, and usually it's the kind of the people around him who can't really stand up to him who
Here we
notice
go.
what's going on.
Just so you
Whereas
know,
this
quotations
time,
from her fitness
because
pal.
Miles is
She's
around,
counting her
you
steps
always have
wherever she
a
is.
kind of
The students
clean
adore Miss
Spider-Man, good
Ferguson.
Spider-Man, normal Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it, to jump around as, even when
I am
Peter
not
starts
wasting my time
losing
fighting
control a little
Yeah.
bit.
It
through
surprised
the
me that
fury of
you
my
don't
sight.
really get control over which Spider-Man you're playing. I figured that the story beats would direct it, but you said essentially the game is always telling you which Spider-Man to be.
Yeah, so after every mission, some of them chain together towards the end, but for the first 20 hours, 25 hours, not sure because I did a lot of the side quest. In between every mission, you can change as much as you want,
Mm.
but every single main mission is either a Miles mission or a Peter mission. Sometimes it changes halfway. You'll start as Peter and finish as Miles, but the game will choose when you switch.
Okay.
And most of the side quests are linked to a specific Spider-Man in ways that are a little bit surprising as well, because the one with Black Cat is a Miles mission. It's not a Peter mission, as you might expect. And
Hmm.
Mysterio, who I don't really associate as having close ties to Miles, maybe I don't read enough of the comics, Mysterio is also a Miles villain in this one.
Yeah, Miles doesn't have that many villains of his own, to be honest, or not
No.
not memorable one, not Mysterio level villains. So I guess it kind of makes sense that he has to borrow so
I
many
mean, Peter has the
Peters.
biggest and best rogues gallery out there, so
Yeah, of
he can spare a
anyone.
few.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then we're taking a look at the Mr. Negative boss fight here, which really goes places.
Yeah, it's a real centerpiece of Miles's story that we didn't really explore too much in his game. Um, Obviously, Mr. Negative killed his dad. The Miles game is about moving on from his dad and coping with being Spider-Man. But in this game, there's a lot of anger and resentment towards Mr. Negative, and that's a real that's probably the biggest driving force in Miles's main story. What I love about this battle, obviously, when you've seen a small clip of it, is as Miles and Mister Negative, as Martin Lee, they discuss things through the battle. Lee's powers will change as they'll notice vulnerabilities in Miles, and not just with classic boss battles where they might adapt to what attack patterns you're using, or they might get a second stage where they have a different shield. It's more on a kind of thematic level.
Hmm.
He notices Miles losing control, or that a certain thing makes Miles um, act more recklessly or whatever, and it kind of responds that feels like they are real characters having this battle like you might see in a comic book as opposed to in a fighting game, which I think is what some of the bigger boss battles could feel like in, say, when he fought Rhino in Miles Morales. He was just kind of make him run into this metal tube,
Yeah.
make him run into the next metal tube, make him run into the third metal tube. Whereas you have to think a bit more with these boss battles, and there's just better storytelling in them.
Hmm. Yeah. And then we touched on this a bit at the beginning, but the some one of the new stealth mechanics here is this zip line.
Yes.
How has stealth evolved here in the sequel?
So the zip line makes a huge difference because you can put it really anywhere you want. Any surface that can be webbed, which is most of them in a Spider-Man game, you
Hmm.
can have this zip line in. So in this scene, I'm kind of using it to get around because I'm outside above kind of the road. But in other scenes, when you're in warehouses or indoor dens, you can strip them across the ceilings and then use that to web people from. We saw Peter doing a little bit in that first clip. So they open up new opportunities for you to run it quite stealthily. One of the reasons I preferred Miles is Miles obviously has his invisibility power. He's also a little bit quicker. Peter is a much heavier fighter. He's cruncher. His abilities do a lot more damage,
Hmm.
but Miles is much faster. So tied with the ability to kind of go anywhere you want and attack from above and turn invisible, which as you can see here, I'm doing quite a bit on these takedowns. There's a lot of opportunities to do things stealthy. You don't unfortunately get much reward. Like if you take people out stealthily, they don't call for backup, which I suppose is the reward. But if you want to just play by attacking everyone by punching them in the face over and over again, you can. But I really liked clearing things out with stealth. It felt like I was seeing more of the city and using more of the game. And they evolve as things go on. Like right now, I'm taking everyone out one at a time, but later in the game, you get an ability to take out two people at a time.
Hmm.
So that completely changes how safe certain arenas are because right now I couldn't take those two guys out who are in front of us, but if I had the special ability that I unlocked later in the game, I could have webbed both of those at once. So you feel like you're kind of growing stronger as you do it.
Cool. Uh, George and I did a preview video a few weeks ago, and we touched on the whole Spider Cop thing,
Yeah.
and all the YouTube comments were like, "Oh, woke agenda. Why are you talking about this?" So let's talk about it again. You touch on your review too, but that there's a first of all that the Spider Cop stuff is not only gone, but
Yeah.
that it feels like a more mature take on Spider-Man. Not that it answers for the Spider Cop stuff, but that it does in some ways kind of go out of its way to show the opposite perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely deliberate. I mean, it probably is part of a kind of woke agenda thing. It is kind of being aware of how the police's role in society have changed. I thought that with Miles in his first game, one of his first interactions with law enforcement, admittedly they're like the military rather than police, is he has a gun pointed at him. That seemed to be quite a violent replication of representation, sorry, of the police force.
Yeah.
In this game, you don't really speak to the police at all. In the first game, obviously, Spider-Man would constantly be talking to Yuri, and he would web people up, and then the cops would show up, and it would be like the save the day. You communicate through the fire chief a lot. He's kind of the non-super connection that you have to crime solving and all the stuff that you're trying to do.
Mm.
And obviously you meet Wraith, who's been in the trails, people know that, who
Hmm.
is Yuri. Her kind of deal is that it doesn't matter if you kill someone as long as you're saving other lives. More of a not an Avenger with a capital A, but kind of looking for vengeance over justice. And as Peter is not black and white in his relationship with her, he's not just like this is bad, you're wrong. There's more nuance to it. And there's one crime where they see it and they show up and go basically, "Hey, the cops show up, they'll arrest you, so stop." Whereas I think in the first game he says like, "I hate drug dealers; they're the worst criminals of all."
Right.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, they are low-level drug dealers are not. You deal with like maniacs who try to blow up
Murderers.
the planet.
Yeah. Man, this sequence is just uh, spectacular to
Yeah,
borrow a
this is the
term.
portal stuff. Obviously, you've just been watching there while we were too busy being woke. The Mysterio section has some of this in as well. As you go into Mysterio's world, you kind of teleport through these portals. It does use them in a bit of more of a curated way than Ratchet and Clank. Obviously, when Ratchet and Clank, you chose where your rift portals went. It was an ability that you had as you controlled Ratchet. Here, they not cutscenes. That was actual play. I was playing in that. You could see I missed some of the portals and I ended up slamming into a building. But the game was choosing where the portals were and when they opened up.
Right.
So there's a little bit more control on Insomniac's side or the developer side with regards to where the portals and things go. But it's still instant how quickly it loads. That's very, very impressive.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that stuff just because, New York is still New York and Spider-Man is still Spider-Man even with his new symbiote abilities, and I'm okay with playing just more Spider-Man, but I think that it's clear just from the footage that you've shared that Insomniac has really thought of new ways to make big moments and create surprises and
Yeah, and
do cool
I
stuff.
didn't like share that much of it because a lot of it was tied to some of the late game story, and even though we could talk about some of that stuff, I wanted to kind of be mindful of the spoilers and the fact that we can only share so much. But a lot of the game takes place in Astoria, and if you don't know New York very well, that's like the suburby bit, so it's not the skyscrapers that we're used to seeing Spider-Man flying around, which does change how the game works a little bit because you're no longer running up tall buildings; you are swinging around in a housing estate.
Hmm.
Um, so there's it is more New York, but there is some difference, I would say.
Hmm. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about the villains because we've got a lot of villains in this
We
game.
do more balanced than last time, though. I feel like in the last game, the Shotgun was kind of there in and around things, but Scorpion and Vulture especially just kind of showed up right at the end.
Hmm.
There was a big kind of it's the Sinister Six, kind of, but you just kind of fought them all in a row. It's a lot more spread out here. Like obviously you're fighting Craven here, who seems to be like the main villain from what the trailers and things have done, but it's not just a case of take down Craven the end. Like this is not the ending battle by a long shot.
Hmm.
It probably is the most spoilery footage we've got, but this is not the end of the game.
Yeah, so Craven, Martin Lee, Venom, and they're all sort of have their own piece of the plot.
Yeah, and you deal with them not quite episodically. Like Craven and Lee are linked. Craven and Venom are linked. And there's other villains who are in there that you discuss things with. It's not a case of you defeat one, you move on to the next one so much. Because obviously the deal is Craven is rounding up villains.
Hmm.
So he's a catalyst for a lot of the meetings that you have. But some of the side stories have full villains in them as well. Whereas I think last time there was like Taskmaster was kind of off to the side, like, oh, go and do a Taskmaster, then go and do some stunts for Screwball, and it was just kind
Screwball,
of
yeah.
there. This time they have narrative weight to them,
Right.
um, which I think makes it feel more lived in than just here are all the villains that Spider-Man has. Go fight them all at once.
Hmm. And in a Symbiote story, Spider-Man is a villain too. And I think we've seen some ways in the movies where that can be handled not very well. How does it go here, performance-wise?
Yeah, performance-wise, look, I didn't like it in the trailers when we saw Peter doing his kind of Bully Maguire voice.
Uh
I
huh.
don't like it now. That was part of the reason I played as Miles more was because Peter was just annoying. But when he's in not motion, that's not when he's in the story, when it's part of the actual story as opposed to just kind of his quips, it it does work quite well because they don't really pull punches. Like, I mean, it's not like he's racist or anything, but he's pretty nasty towards like Miles and MJ and Harry. Like, he's not just kind of like that's kind of the criticism of the Tobey Maguire version, that he's just kind of a weird, gross emo who dances
Yeah.
in the street. This Peter's pretty nasty to people. Like he is a horrible guy to be around. Um, so that's quite interesting. But I do think as far as the turning into symbiote goes, it's how Miles, Harry, and MJ, particularly Miles, because he plays him a lot, how they cope with that is what's the most interesting part of it.
You're have quite a refined palate as a gamer. You're a highbrow gamer. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah,
And so, when it comes to this like big budget IP stuff, you're a bit hard to impress.
I am.
Um,
Yeah,
but
I am. But
but this
I
is
am impressed by this.
yeah, this is a 4.5 for you, right?
Yeah, I said in my review that I felt it was like it's like a 4.5, sorry, it's like a 4 out of 5 that is so good at being a 4 out of 5 and does so many fresh things with regards to the loading screens, with regards to how it integrates the story into the boss battles, with regards to how it updates the map marker side quests, and it makes them feel like real missions. There's only like one that you get towards the end that feels like you're kind of ticking off a box every time. The rest of them feel like you're just being Spider-Man. So I think this is the future of what 4 out of 5 games are going to be like. But
Mm,
as a kind of trailblazer, it is a 4.5, I think, for me. It's, when I was playing this, my partner was sitting with me, and she loves 24. She loves the series 24. I
okay.
hate it. I think it's terrible. I think it's stupid. And she says, this is your 24. Like, this is your version of just a really stupid thing that you just enjoy and you can't justify it. And it probably is, but I can't help it. I really do love the Spider-Man games. I think they're great. They
Yeah,
are my favorite version of this kind of IP blockbuster explosion of color.
I know what you mean. And to be honest, the first one didn't grab me. I kind of was falling out of love with open world games and the sort of checklist style
Yeah,
map marker thing. Miles really brought me around just because of its story and its characters, and I feel like this is pulling in those elements and sort of bringing it all together
yeah,
in a way
it
that looks
definitely
really
has
impressive.
learned a lot from Miles. I would say that's it's more about Peter. It is kind of Peter's game, and Miles does things in it.
Hmm.
They are the most impressive and interesting things, but it remains nevertheless Peter's game. But it learns on a technical or mechanical level, I suppose. It seems to have learned a lot more from Miles, which would make sense because Miles itself learned from the first game.
Yeah,
It wasn't a new version of that; it was building on that, and then this built on the most recent one, which is Miles.
awesome. Any last thoughts to touch on?
We didn't really talk about it too much in the review that we've just done, but I just want to mention that Haley is obviously with Miles in the game.
Yeah.
She remains the standout character. I think the way that they've managed to integrate a deaf character in a way that feels really organic, but also just her personality is very, very different from all the other characters in the game. I feel like all the other characters in the game act like they're superhero sidekicks, and it can just
Hmm.
be a little bit annoying. Haley feels like she's from a different type of game, and that's really engaging to watch her relationship with Miles develop.
Cool. I love Haley. Okay. That's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. You can find Stacey's full review link down in the description. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell, and visit us at thegamer.com. That's the gamer, no space.